The environment is greater than the will. On resonance, pilgrimage routes, and the emptiness where bliss lives. You notice it before you understand it. Somewhere around the third day, maybe the fourth, when the blisters have settled into a dull fact and the mind has stopped composing the email it will send when this is over, something shifts. Not in you. Around you. The air has a different weight. The path, which looked like any other dirt track on a satellite image, feels held. The trees along this particular stretch have been leaning over walkers for 800 years. The stones beneath your boots were smoothed by feet that were not yours. And the silence, not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of a place that has been listening for a very long time, presses against your chest like a hand. You did not earn this. You did not meditate your way here or journal your way here or set an intention precise enough to summon it. You just kept walking, and the place did something to you that you cannot name and did not ask for. Every pilgrim knows this moment, the shift in the chest, the sudden quiet, the uneasy recognition that whatever is happening is not coming from inside. It is coming from the ground. There is a teaching attributed to Paramahansa Yogananda, the Indian mystic who brought Kriya Yoga to the West in 1920 and spent 30 years trying to explain to Americans what their optimism could not reach, that sits at the center of this essay like a stone in a river. Everything else flows around it. The environment is greater than the will. 6 words that dismantle the entire Western project of self-improvement. 6 words the ego hears and immediately begins to argue with. Yogananda was not making a motivational point. He was describing a law as impersonal and non-negotiable as gravity. Place yourself in the proximity of a realized soul, he taught, and your consciousness will be drawn upward whether you understand the mechanism or not. Place yourself in an environment of agitation and craving, and your consciousness will descend by the same law. The direction is not your choice. The environment is. The mechanism has a name in physics, sympathetic resonance. Strike a tuning fork and hold it near a second fork of the same frequency. The second fork begins to vibrate, not because anything touches it, but because the field of the first fork is strong enough to set it in motion. No contact, no effort. Just proximity and time. This is not a metaphor. It is the closest physical analog to what Yogananda described, the guru as a struck fork, vibrating at a frequency so high that everything nearby begins to hum. The disciple does not need to understand the teaching. The disciple needs to be in the room. But Yogananda's insight goes further than the guru-disciple relationship. He extended it to place to the land itself, to the accumulated residue of spiritual practice performed in a specific location over centuries. Temples are not sacred because someone declared them sacred. They are sacred because 1,000,000 prayers soaked into the stone and the stone began to vibrate. The pilgrim on the Camino, the Henro circling Shikoku's 88 temples, the walker ascending to Tirupati for the 8th time, none of them would use the word resonance. But every one of them would recognize the experience. You arrive somewhere and the place is already working on you. Before you have done a single thing, the environment is greater than the will. So what, exactly, is the pilgrim walking into? Not a building, not a doctrine, a field, layered, accumulating, alive, and the field has at least 3 registers, each one reinforcing the others. The first is the land itself. Sacred geography is not a projection. Certain places on the earth carry a quality that precedes any human interpretation, the way a river canyon amplifies sound, or a mountain pass funnels wind into something that feels, against every rational objection, like a tension. The Meseta in central Spain, the cedar forests of Cumano, the red earth of the Larapinta in central Australia. These places were not neutral ground onto which humans pasted meaning. The meaning was geological. The first walkers felt it, and the feeling is why they walked there and not somewhere else. But the land is only the substrate. The second layer, and the heavier one, is what has been deposited there by everyone who walked before. An avatar walks a route, their presence, whatever you want to call it. Holiness, realization, a consciousness vibrating at a frequency most humans never reach, charges the ground the way a current charges a wire. That charge draws seekers. The seekers come with sincerity, with prayer, with the unadorned intention to be changed. Each sincere step is a deposit. Each genuine prayer adds to the field. The rote gets more sacred over time, not less. This inverts the Western assumption about old things. Old things decay, old things lose power. The cathedral crumbles, the ritual ossifies, the institution calcifies. But a pilgrimage route is not an institution. It is a field, and the field compounds. 1,000 years of walking does not wear the path out. It wears it in. Every pilgrim is both receiving from the field and contributing to it, a spiritual flywheel that accelerates across centuries. The Camino is more potent now than it was when the first medieval pilgrims set out for Santiago, not because the church maintained it, but because a million acts of walking with intention left a residue that no institution could manufacture or destroy. The third layer is the living community, the other seekers on the path right now. The collective field of dozens or hundreds of people all walking in the same direction with the same unspoken question. This is not just companionship, it is mutual entrainment, the biological tendency of organisms in proximity to synchronize. Heart sync. Breathing syncs, something subtler than either of these syncs too, and everyone on a long walk has felt it the moment when the group becomes a single organism moving through the landscape, and the individual mind, no longer required to carry the full weight of its own consciousness, finally lets go. 3 layers of the same force, all pulling in the same direction. The land, the dead, the living. No wonder it works. Here is what the ego does not want you to notice. You cannot still your mind for 10 seconds. Try it. Right now. 10 seconds of no thought, no commentary, no narration. The ego, that tireless editor-in-chief of your inner life, will not permit it. It will interrupt with a plan, a worry, a judgment about how the meditation is going. You cannot stop your thoughts. You cannot slow your heartbeat by deciding to. You cannot will your pupils to dilate. The body you live in runs on systems you do not control and did not design. And the mind that claims dominion over your spiritual progress is the same mind that cannot sit quietly in a room alone for 5 minutes without reaching for a phone. And yet, individual willpower is the foundational assumption of every self-improvement framework the culture has produced. Set a goal, build a habit, track your progress, optimize your morning routine, curate your mindset. The entire apparatus assumes a sovereign individual who can, through sufficient discipline, reshape themselves from the inside out. The pilgrim knows better. The pilgrim has tried the inside-out approach, the apps, the journals, the 30-day challenges, and has arrived at a truth the self-help industry cannot afford to speak. The self is not strong enough to fix the self. The tool cannot repair the tool. This is not failure, it is intelligence. The pilgrim's decision to change the environment rather than fight the self is the most practical spiritual insight available. If the field is stronger than the will, then choosing your field is the most important choice you make. The secular version of this principle surfaces everywhere, scrubbed of its depth. You are the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Silicon Valley repeats this at conferences and in podcasts, framing it as a networking strategy. Curate your circle, level up your peers, surround yourself with winners. It is Yogananda's teaching repackaged as a life hack, and nobody noticed the theft. The original instruction was not about optimizing your professional network. It was about the most fundamental fact of consciousness. You are not sovereign. You are permeable. The field you inhabit will shape you whether you consent to it or not. The pilgrim consents. That is the difference. The pilgrim does not white-knuckle it alone in an apartment with a meditation app, trying to will peace into existence against the background hum of a city engineered for agitation. The pilgrim walks into a field that has been doing this work for 1,000 years and says, I am not strong enough to do this alone. The route is. And the route answers, the law is not kind. It does not discriminate. The same principle that makes a pilgrimage route a field of elevation makes a gang a field of gravity. The crab in a bucket dynamic, where any crab that tries to climb out is pulled back down by the others, is not cruelty. It is resonance operating in the other direction. The bucket is a field. The frequency of the bucket is the frequency of the bucket. And the individual crab, for all its will, is not stronger than the field it inhabits. The gang and the ashram operate by the same law. This is the part the spiritual seeker wants to skip. The part where the teaching stops being comforting and starts being dangerous. If environment shapes consciousness regardless of intention, then every environment you inhabit is shaping you right now. The open plan office, the doom-scrolling feed, the relationship you stay in because leaving is harder than adapting, the neighborhood, the news cycle, the ambient frequency of a culture organized around acquisition, competition, and the production of anxiety as a motivational tool. You are being tuned, constantly. The question is not whether the field affects you. The question is which field you are in. Yogananda did not dress this up. He said it plainly. If your environment pulls you downward, no amount of personal practice will overcome it. You will practice in the morning and be undone by noon. You will meditate for 20 minutes and spend the remaining 23 hours and 40 minutes marinating in a frequency that erases whatever stillness you found on the cushion. This is not pessimism, it is the most optimistic teaching in the contemplative canon. Because if the field is stronger than the will, in both directions, then the single most important thing you can do for your spiritual life is not practice harder, not read more books, not achieve some breakthrough state of consciousness. It is to move, physically, to get up and walk into a different field. The pilgrim is not running away. The pilgrim is the person who finally understood the physics. Now, the essay must turn. Everything I have described so far, the resonance, the field, the flywheel, the law that works in both directions, leads the mind toward a reasonable expectation. The pilgrimage route strips away the noise, burns off the static, peels back the layers. And underneath all those layers, at the very center of the thing, there must be something, a core, a golden seed, the real you, polished and gleaming, waiting to be uncovered. Everyone knows the onion metaphor. You peel a layer, another. The tears are part of it. The process hurts. But you keep going because the assumption is that the center holds something worth finding. Peel the last layer. The tiny translucent bulb comes apart in your hands, and inside it, nothing. The center of the onion is empty. This is where most seekers turn back. They feel the absence and interpret it as failure. I didn't go deep enough. I need another retreat, another teacher, another 10 days. The emptiness feels like a mistake because every framework they have ever inhabited, religious, secular, therapeutic, self-help, promised that the work would produce a thing, a realization you could hold, a self you could keep, a state you could maintain. But the contemplative traditions, at their most honest, say something the seeker is not prepared to hear. The emptiness is not a mistake. The emptiness is the destination. 30 spokes share the hub of a wheel. It is the center hole that makes it useful. Lao Tzu. The hub of a wheel is the hole. The usefulness of the vessel is the space inside it. The room is defined by the walls, but you live in the emptiness the walls enclose. Lao Tzu saw this 2,500 years ago. The Buddhists formalized it. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Into a principle so radical that traditions have spent millennia trying to soften it into something the mind can metabolize. But they cannot soften it because it is not a concept. It is an experience. And the experience is this. The pilgrim walks and walks, shedding comfort, identity, agenda, the story of who they are and why they are walking. Layer after layer falls away. And what remains at the end of the road is not a shinier version of the self that set out. What remains is space, absence, an openness so complete it has no edges. The surprise, the thing no amount of reading can prepare you for, is that the emptiness is not cold. It is not void. It is not the nothing of nihilism, the blank stare of a universe that does not care. It is alive, it hums, it is, for lack of a better word, and every tradition has failed to find a better word, which is itself a clue, bliss. The layers were never protecting something fragile, they were burying something indestructible. The noise was not a byproduct of living. The noise was a barricade. And behind the barricade, in the silence the root carved out, was the thing the pilgrim was looking for before the pilgrim knew there was something to look for. You are not the layers. You are the space they surrounded. The emptiness at the center of the onion is the emptiness at the end of the road. Same teaching, delivered by the body instead of the mind. Come back to the route, come back to the third day, the fourth, the trees, the smooth stones, the silence pressing against the chest. The mistake is to think the route is giving you something, a charge, a blessing, a download of spiritual energy that fills you up the way a meal fills an empty stomach. The Western mind reaches for this framing because the Western mind understands transactions. You walk, you receive, input, output, effort, reward. But the route is not a charger plugging you in. It is a solvent, dissolving what does not belong. The resonance field does not add a new frequency to the fork. It strips away the interference, the dampening, the noise, the accumulated crud, until the fork vibrates at the frequency it was always capable of. The fork did not need to be given something. It needed something taken away. This is Yogananda's deepest point, and it is the one the seeker is least prepared for. Self-realization is not an acquisition. It is not a peak experience you unlock after enough retreats, enough kilometers, enough suffering redeemed. It is a subtraction. It is what remains when everything that was never you falls away. The route knows this. The route has always known this. That is why it does not teach, it weathers. Day by day, blister by blister, Sunrise by sunrise, it removes the urgency, the identity, the desperate need to arrive somewhere other than here. And when enough has been removed, not when enough has been added, the pilgrim looks up and sees something that was there the whole time. Ramana Maharshi, the South Indian sage who spent 50 years on a single mountain answering the same question, would ask his visitors who was walking. Not to be cryptic, to point at the obvious. The one who walks is the one who was there before the walking started, the one who will be there after. The walk does not create the walker, it reveals the walker to themselves. And the revelation is always the same. Not a self made solid by effort, something lighter than that. Something that cannot be held because it is not a thing, an openness that was always there, papered over by the noise of a life spent adding layers. Achievements, opinions, identities, possessions, narratives, accumulated in the belief that enough layers would eventually feel like a center. The root strips the layers, the field does the stripping, and the pilgrim who set out believing they were walking towards something discovers they were walking away from everything that was never theirs. The environment is greater than the will. And the greatest thing the environment does is take.